right, welcome everybody. Today I have Siofra Bradigan joining me, and I found Siofra while I was looking for how to make a wand on YouTube, and that was one of the first videos I watched of hers, and then I just loved her energy, so I kept watching more videos, and I was like, I would love to have this woman on my podcast. So, welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
And before I hit record, she was showing me her amazing staff, which she's holding right here. And there's just so many awesome little charms and stories that go along with it. Would you like to share that with us?
Sure. I love talking about my staff and it likes to be talked about. Seriously, it's a show off. There's no doubt about it. But I have an amber ball that I put to the top of the staff, which because my husband's staff has got a large quartz crystal, and crystal and amber between the two of them make electric magnetic energy. And someone gave me this amber ball. So that's its most recent iteration. It has changed shape and form over the years, but I think this is its established shape. One hopes, because it's a lot of work. And I actually made the claw that holds the ball in place because it kept falling off. Trying to figure out how to put something on top of a stick is not easy. And and I have a relationship with dragons too. And so that just seemed like a perfect thing to do. And then I sealed it up top with a pentagram to keep the ball in place so it doesn't fall down. It's rather a frightening thing when it falls off.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And you're like, what was that? And
That's pretty
so,
big.
yeah, my staff initially came to me in, I'd say 1980, 81, when I went on a trip to Texas. That was like 10 days that was so packed with things I had to do. You couldn't have 20 people getting together and figuring out the itinerary wouldn't have been able to come up with all the stuff that happened in my 10-day trip there. But this was one of the things that came to me when I was on that trip. And the woman, I did a healing on her, and she had picked this when it was an unadorned piece of wood off of a beach in, I think, the Gulf of Mexico.
Huh.
So it was a piece of driftwood. So that's why we don't know what kind of wood it is. And she kept it in her house and kept it behind her door and waited for me to come from northern British Columbia to get it. She was an interesting woman. She sort of collected things for other people. She was like a halfway house for objects or something, waiting for their true owners to arrive.
Uh-huh.
And I went to her house. She was going to show me her staff, which was behind the door. And I looked behind the door and all I saw was this. So I was like amazed. And then she gave it to me, and it was an incredibly intense emotional experience. And
Aw.
she channeled music and she sang me a song that was so specific to me and who I was and how I felt. I mean, it's like I have no idea now what that song was because it was a spontaneous utterance,
Yeah.
but it was incredibly powerful. And so I really felt like the universe was recognizing me from all the work I had done up till then. And it sort of highlighted my natural authority with spirits and beings and that kind of thing. And since then, it's now been decorated with objects that relate directly to my journey. So I have a deer pouch because a deer is my animal. I actually found this at a local thrift store.
I love it.
That was funny. Someone called me up on the phone and said they've got a deer pouch over at the thrift store and they don't know what to do with it. And I think you might like it. Would you like it? I'm going like, yeah, I would like it. And I jump, I go down there and they said, I hear you have a deer pouch. I'm going like, yeah. Can I see it? I'm like, yeah. It's like, I'd like to buy it. They're going like, okay. They were like, why would someone want this? But you know, I did. And then one of my other power animals is the bear. And when I worked and volunteered up at the local prison, one of the prisoners, the last group I worked with actually, found this bear claw when he was out in the woods working on forest fire prevention around the area. So I feel good about this bear claw because I didn't really want to get one from somebody's trophy hunting in particular.
Yeah.
So it was just there. And then this is a stone that a friend of mine found in Mexico again when she was on a trip when I was in southern British Columbia and brought it back. Well, yeah, and when we were showing this off, I hadn't gotten to this bell here. This bell, this is a temple bell, it's a Japanese temple bell that my best friend who was in Indonesia found on a path on the way to a temple in the jungle.
Wow.
So she picked that up and brought it to me. So that became very special. These three marbles represent the three women that were there when I got my staff and did the healing that I did on her, because there was three of us who were present, and she thought that that was an important thing to remember. So she
Yeah.
specifically picked these out, gave them to me. And then this here is the Tibetan a Tibetan temple bell or Tibetan bell that was found in a second century Roman site, but it's from like the 1400s. So it's like a time traveling item. They're not sure how it got there. And then this here is the stone that I found when I was at the total solar eclipse. And it was on the ground. And I walked over it after the eclipse was over and everyone was gone. And I looked down and there it was. And so when no one claimed it, which I tried to see if it, because someone spent a lot of time and energy very carefully knotting and wrapping
Yeah.
this crystal. So then I mounted it on my staff as a remembering of that experience, because being in a total solar eclipse was a lot more intense than I had any idea it was going to be.
Yeah.
I realized in my head, I had this idea because we have a yellow sun that the corona would be yellow. And I've been working with this white light of, life force energy for years. And when it happened, that was the color of the light. It's the purest white light you've ever seen. And I screamed. We all did. We were screaming and crying for the whole time that it was visible. It was
Wow.
interesting to see everyone in the field. It was like we were all intensely physically and emotionally affected by
Yeah.
being in the eclipse.
That's supposed to be super, super charged positive energy, like the solar eclipse. And I'm curious, do you remember what year it was?
I think it was 2000, it was a 16 or 17.
Okay, I
It's not
remember
hard.
that one.
Yeah, it's not hard to look up. And it actually, with my manifestation skills, the way I work, I really wanted to go see this eclipse. And the state of Oregon, where I live, the the state parks and so forth jacked up the price of campgrounds to the point where it was insane. Two to $3,000 for a single night in order to stay in a campground that was in the zone of the
Oh
eclipse.
my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not that wealthy. I don't have that money to sort of just splurge to do this. And so
Right?
I'm thinking, I really want to be there. I really want to be there. So I'm searching and searching. And I found this farm that was right in the path. And this woman grows apples and makes apple cider. That's what her farm is. And she has a music festival every year. So
Mhm.
she cleared one of her fields and rented it out to anyone who wanted to come for a reasonable price.
Nice.
And, got the porta potties and all that other stuff. And it was allowed us all to come. My son and his wife came up from California. My friend from Portland came down, and the rest of us went over and landed there. And it was the perfect environment for that. Perfect view. We all sat in our chairs and just looked up and screamed. so so yeah, I was very excited. And I managed to make it happen. I mean, everybody's going like, how did you find this place? That's how I work. That's part of my magic,
Yeah.
is being able to somehow get the message out to the universe and wiggle through the blockages that aren't meant for me until I find like, there it is. That's where I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm going to do. And that brings up the subject of what is a witch.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about that. And I think about that fairly often because my definition of a witch is an individual who is connected to and tapping into the forces and the movements of energy of the natural life that's around us. And it allows me to sense things coming that are going to like cause me trouble so that I can get out of the way or be prepared. And it helps me to move through my life in that, in that sense. And that's how things I do come to me. The universe sort of sends things along its pathway or conduit, and
Mm-hmm.
then they land at my feet, and then I look at them and go, huh, should I do that? Or should I not do that? And the choices that you make, of course, inform your magic and make you the kind of witch that you are, because everyone is different.
Yeah.
But really, that to me is the thing, is being in touch with the natural tides, the ebb and flow of energy. Is like if you're coming across a river of energy and you can see which way it's going, if it's not going the direction you want, you don't jump in the river.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You hang back and wait for circumstances to change, and then you can jump in
Yeah, which I bet
and let
takes
it
time
take
to
you.
learn, right?
It does. It's a lifetime of experience and learning how to follow your intuition
Mm-hmm.
and knowing what your intuition is. Because a lot of times that's one of the confusing things when people first start walking this path. It's like, how do I know the difference between my intuition, spirit voice, my inner voice, my anxieties and fears and paranoias, insecurities or whatever coming up.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a lot of work to do to
Yeah.
actually walk this path effectively.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I've heard you say too is that you've used this path a lot to do your own inner work.
Oh yeah. And that was in the beginning when I first started. Well, when I found the first book that actually I could buy, and was the Starhawk's book, The Spiral Dance. And I was living up in the middle of the woods at the time. And when I read that, it was like, wow, here's someone else who feels the same way I do about the world and has some of the similar experiences. And she
Mhm.
has some great exercises in there that are about clearing your own stuff, taking charge of your own unconscious and so forth. And
Yeah.
that's where the cup transformation exercise that I have a video up on comes from. It's
Mm.
from that, being able to take the energy that's not working for you, externalize it, name it, and then transform it into something that you can use and then take that back in. And so that is like, in the beginning, that's what magic was for me,
Mhm.
was healing from my own trauma, taking charge of my life. And it doesn't happen overnight, obviously.
Yeah.
I did that ritual constantly. I mean, I did that ritual probably every day, and other ones like trying to get anger out of me. There was
Mhm.
one she had in there where you put your rage into a black stone on your forehead and, scream about whatever it is and really get it in there and throw it in a river. And I was living right by a river. And so this was
Wow.
really fortuitous as far as
Yeah.
that. And so I would do that, and my nearest neighbor's a mile away, so I can scream as loud as I want. I don't have to worry about my neighbors calling the cops and going like, "What is going on at your house?"
Yeah.
And I would do it until I felt emptied and released, and then I would throw it in the river and let the earth take it back. And one of the things I noticed in the beginning, I was really reluctant at first to get rid of my negative energy
Mm.
because I was worried that if I let it out and let it go into the earth, that somehow it would harm the planet. It would
Yeah.
harm the life around me. And
Yeah.
that's not an uncommon anxiety that people have about doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I realized, take the dirtiest water you've ever seen, throw it through some rocks and some gravel and some sand, comes out clean on the other side.
Yeah.
The earth knows how to redirect and reuse all energy.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was like, ah, this is okay. I can do this and I can get rid of this stuff that's harming me. And then it has a extra double purpose that it will help the planet because
Mhm.
I'm not hoarding this energy, because negative energy is powerful, just like positive energy is powerful.
Yeah.
And, so it was interesting to go through those sort of transformations when I lived up there in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bought that book because you had mentioned it in a video, and when I opened it up, like I started kind of reading around and going to certain parts that had things I was curious about. It dawned on me how similar witches, shamans, and priestesses are, or how they all kind of overlap. And I was just absolutely amazed by that because I've already kind of resonated with the priestess archetype and the shaman. But the witch, I have to say, I think I had some reservations about it because um there's something, well, I think a lot of it is cultural from like what we're raised to believe witches are. And it's not that I thought all witches were bad, but I think there was sort of like a fear of my own power possibly, and I wanted to be able to use my power for good. So I feel like there's divine timing with how I kind of started to find out about this path because not that I would have been doing anything bad before, but I don't know. I think everything happens in right timing, you know?
Well, yeah, the vessel has to be ready to accept the information. There's no
Mhm.
doubt about that. And that's the thing. The archetype of the witch that's out there is so uninformed.
Mhm.
And my husband and I have had discussions about this. And one of the things that I think might be the case is that people who don't understand magic and how it works imagine what they would do if all of a sudden they had the power to change things and transform things around them. And most of them aren't nice people. And so what they imagine we would do with this ability is like, take control and, kill people with it or make them do what we want and dance when we say or whatever,
Yeah.
which is really so not what it's supposed to be about anyway. And I've noticed that, currently there's a lot of younger people who are getting interested in the path, and a fair number of them come from that idea that they feel helpless and powerless in their own lives, and they want to have a way to control their environment and the situation around them,
Yeah.
and are looking for how to do that. But if they last long enough, they discover the reason for doing that is because it's you are the one you learn how to control, not others.
Yes.
You become aware of what's going on in your environment so that you can move through without making like it's not a bull in a china shop kind of thing and knock through a wall. It's
Yeah.
like finding a set of stairs or some logs to stick up next to the wall and then climb up over the wall without damaging the wall and leaving the wall behind, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that like for trauma victims, this is an extremely powerful path because psychology can take you so far, but then there's all that stuff that was placed in you that you can't remember, in the subconscious.
Yeah.
And magic and ritual is a tool that you can use to access that part of your brain and actually change it up and turn it into something that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I feel like I sort of crashed into this path, like perhaps I was already doing that some, but then it was like something just opened up so quickly, and then I kind of had to catch up. I had to play catch up a little bit with my soul, and started using, like meditation and oracle cards and all these other tools to sort of understand my subconscious more. And I'm still doing it. Like I
Well, it never ends.
right. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, it's like you get a huge relief when you get rid of a layer,
Yeah.
and then it dries up, and then there's another one.
Uh-huh.
And it happens fairly frequently in the beginning. The
Yeah.
farther along you go, the longer it takes for you to get to the next layer because you've cleared enough stuff out.
Yeah.
But, it's never completely gone. There's always that potential to find another layer that hasn't been triggered in, forever, and start working through that. But it does get easier. That's the thing. It's like it's longer periods of time between them. And so like when it comes to victims and survivors, I was a victim, I became a survivor, and now I consider myself a warrior. that I
Mm,
have used what I learned and what experiences I had and turned them into strengths for me, so
mhm,
that they no longer decide for me who I'm attracted to, what kind of relationships I want to have, and so forth. And that is through the ritual, paying attention to the ritual and different parts of myself and trying to heal those disparate pieces,
mhm.
that you become more whole. And
Yeah.
so you may not be able to change what happened to you,
Mm,
but you can transform what it does to your future,
yes. Yeah.
so that then you're more conscious, and it's taking responsibility for your own development and your own path.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
I
I
love
think I think
it.
a lot of people are sort of afraid to look at the shadow aspects of themselves because I think the ego kind of has this little safety mechanism like that says, "No, I don't want to change. Like this is comfortable," you know?
There's
But
definitely that. And will I find out I'm really some horrible thing and there's nothing I can do about it, which was one of my fears. And when I
uh-huh.
went into therapy, it's like, when I first started the therapy part, after I did all the rituals, like I prepared my subconscious, and then I ended up in first a self-defense class, which was an interesting experience because I'd been assaulted in front of my children,
Mm,
and I needed to do something to show them that I wasn't going to just stay there. And I
yeah.
actually brought my daughter to my self-defense class because it was only for females. And when it was getting ready to join, I was absolutely terrified. I had this overwhelming anxiety about taking this class. And I'm
Huh.
like, why am I feeling this way? And I realized it was because I knew that doing this thing would change me in a way that could not be undone.
Yeah.
I would be transformed by taking this and doing this thing. But I didn't know what I was going to be turning into. And the fear of the unknown and the uncertainty of
Mm,
what that will be is definitely something people have to decide to work through.
yeah.
And the same thing happened when I joined the incest survivors group. I had exactly the same anxiety, that I was going to remember something, that I hadn't remembered. And again, this was going to transform me in ways that I could not predict, but then I had to do it anyway. It was like that or die.
Yeah.
It became a definite survival thing. So I think that a lot of times that's what, the anxiety comes from, that kind of a place where, you know, um, and also the idea of taking personal responsibility for your own development makes people feel generally uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's actually so empowering. But I guess it's just that mental switch of actually enjoying having the responsibility rather than thinking it's a burden. I don't know.
That's part of it. And also, like, can I really trust myself?
Yeah,
Am I actually capable of making right decisions?
yeah,
Um, is there some higher authority that can tell me whether I'm doing it right or not? And
yeah,
and then, having like someone say, this is how you do it. But the problem is that it's a personal experience,
yeah,
and it's different for everyone. It's
yes.
why there's general connections between all different magical paths. There's things about it that are the same in all of them, and then some things that are different.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the reason for that is that, your cultural background, your experiential background, the kind of personality that you are, that you're working with in this life, and all that stuff are factors in how it evolves and exposes itself to, what you need to do and how you need to do it. Because, like, one kind of ritual can work extremely well for a large group of people and then have really bad reactions to a handful.
Hmm.
I was in an all women's coven when I was in Santa Cruz. And every time I planned a ritual, I got that reaction. Half the
Interesting.
people absolutely hated what I did, and the other half absolutely loved it.
That is
And
interesting.
it was very interesting. And I was like, I don't understand why. I thought this was a really great thing to do here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it's a psychology. Oops, I'm going to put my staff down.
Okay.
I can use my hands. There you go, guys. All right.
And you just that just when I was looking at the amber on your staff as you were putting it down, it reminded me you said that you work with the dragons, and I work with dragons too. I'm curious how you work with them.
Well, I've just met a number. Um,
Okay.
I did a guided meditation once that I ended up flying to the moon on the back of a green dragon, which was just way cool.
I love it.
So they pop up, but I've actually encountered some in life. I had an experience in around Monterey, California, where I met a non-human spirit being, which could be identified as a two-headed dragon, but the heads are at either end. Since it's
Oh,
a spirit, it doesn't need to have a digestive tract.
right.
And there's stories about this particular spirit in native lore. I've managed to run across a few references to it and met someone who actually knew what it was called and wrote it down, but then I can't find the note. It
Yeah.
drives me crazy every so often. What is that called? I can't remember. I wrote it down. Where did I write it down? I don't know. Maybe one day it will come back.
Yeah, when
Okay.
you need it.
But this spirit being it's huge. It's like probably a good 10 feet tall,
Mhm.
I'd say, the head. And the lore goes that if it approaches you, it's looking for a warrior to stand the ground, because the only time it can see the other half of itself is if there is a human person who is brave enough to stand still with its first head and wait for the second head to come.
Whoa.
And I can tell you the experience was quite intense. I had known this, it was in the back of my head. Somehow I knew when it started what it was and what I had to do.
Yeah.
Um, but when it first started, when I felt it coming, it was dusk, night was falling. And all of a sudden, the shadows in the trees and on the ground became dangerous. Like there was this anticipation of fear and danger that if we moved, we would be killed, we would
Hmm.
be destroyed. I was with someone at the time. And so, I said, don't move, we have to stand here and wait. And when it comes, it's just overwhelming, powerful. And then when the second head arrived, it was like it becomes an ally. And
Hmm.
I've met more than one of these. I've encountered another one north of me in person with another group of people. And then I have one that I can feel go circling out in the distance every so often, because they've got a very specific kind of energy. But
Mhm.
once it came and that happened, then the forest completely changed, and all of the fairies and the nature spirits came out, and they followed us back to the cabin because we were staying at a cabin. And they came in and filled the cabin up and wanted me to tell them stories about creation and the god and the goddess and how things began. So I spent the next several hours entertaining the fairy folk with mythology that I could dredge up and talk about,
Oh my
while this
gosh.
big two-headed thing circled around the cabin all night long. It was like
Wow.
quite intense.
Yeah.
That was a pretty close encounter. Once when I was in an airplane, I was looking out the window and I saw an air dragon fly by. And I was like, oh, well, that was unexpected. Like, and I realized that they're part of the jet stream
Ah.
and they can make changes, they can move the
Yeah.
jet stream with their flight path and
Well, I
stuff
was
like
gonna
that.
say I wouldn't be surprised if I was on that flight because I often call in my dragon if there's turbulence. Yeah, that's funny.
It was interesting just to see it go by.
Yeah,
So like, they do their thing, I do mine. That's how I work with the fairy folk too. Is
yeah.
like they have their culture and their needs and so forth. And sometimes our paths intersect and I can give them a hand like I did in the woods when I was healing the ley line that was harming them. And sometimes they give me a hand, give me a warning that something is coming, or try to help heal me. I've had them come into my room when I'm sick and try and give me energy to heal my body, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. That's how I work with the dragons mostly is when I do Akashic record readings, they come in for healing a lot. They heal people with their transmutational flames, and then they send like healing flames after. And it's really cool. It's really powerful. I had two dragon guides with me for a while, and it was kind of wild because I used to drink and I stopped drinking. And when I stopped, the other dragon guide left, and he was like, "You don't need me to protect you anymore
Oh,
because
interesting.
you're not, exposing yourself
You're not
to."
vulnerable.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was really fascinating. But yeah, I'm curious. So in some of your videos, you have said you knew you were a witch since you were a little girl. And would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Well, what I remember is that I always knew I was a witch from the time I have memory. And one of the reasons was because I remembered being burned at the stake. I actually had a couple of different past lives that kind of came with me uh, when I was born. And so I was different um, than the average child out of the gate.
Yeah.
Apparently, I brought some of the spirit stuff I knew with me when I came into this world. And being a witch was definitely one of them, although I didn't know exactly what it meant. I just knew that I was a witch.
Mhm.
And, I would interact with the angels that were around. I would see them all the time. And I would see the nature spirits and, find different parts of nature. I interacted a lot just going out in the woods around where we lived and climbing trees and just being with the world. And I found that coming out as a witch back then, even especially when men found out that I was a witch, there was this certain attraction that
Hmm.
they had to my perceived power,
Interesting.
which I found quite annoying. I'm like, yeah, go away and leave me alone. But I always had premonitions when I went through puberty. I went through a period of intense premonitions, and
Hmm.
it was, very confusing when that
Mhm.
was happening because I was a teenager and going through hormone shifts and so forth. But every time I had one, I told my mother about it. I never kept anything from her.
Yeah.
And because she saw me going through these premonitions and every one I had happened, I was never wrong at that point about anything
Okay.
that was happening. And some of
Wow.
them were kind of intense. Like
Yeah.
the first big one, I was doing dishes in the kitchen, I think with my brother, and we took the thing out of the sink, and the water was going down. It made a blurping sound, and that turned into this very loud noise suddenly in my head. And I suddenly knew that there was going to be a car accident, that some people were going to hit a car or hit
Mhm.
a pole, and that it was going to happen at 9:30. So, I told my mother, and my mother's response to anything weird was go to bed and go to sleep, and everything will be fine in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Sort of reset, right?
Yeah.
But who can go to bed and go to sleep by 9:30? That's not happening. And I'm
Yeah.
getting more and more anxious as it's getting closer and closer. And I remember sitting in front of my mother's vanity in the bathroom and looking at myself in the mirror and wondering, why do I know that this is going to happen? I don't know these people. I can't warn them. There's nothing I can say or do that's going to change anything. I don't understand why I know this. It was very frustrating. And
Yeah.
then I went outside at 9:30. I had to be outside. I needed to be outside when it happened. And I walked out the door, and the night was quiet enough. I actually saw it take place. I saw the headlights on the road go straight up in the air, and I heard the crash. I did not know what metal crushing sounded like
Yeah.
until then. And then the siren started, people lost power. My mother came running out of the house because at that point she was convinced I'd seen my own death because she heard the crash too.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of thing was pretty regular. And I started to determine that there was a difference between a premonition that you can't do anything about and
Mhm.
one that you can change. And I started having both kinds.
Whoa.
And I was in a car accident that I knew I couldn't change. I had it while I was in the car, and
Yeah.
I suddenly knew we were going to be in a crash.
Yeah.
And and then I thought about saying something to the driver, but a voice says, if you say anything, it might be worse.
Oh,
So I didn't say anything, and I thought maybe I'm wrong. I'm always doubting myself.
yeah.
And then we were like a mile from our house, and we were crossing the highway, and we got hit by a truck and
Gee.
spun around, and everything that I'd seen happened.
Yeah.
But we were all okay. And I thought about that because the guy who was driving was tired, and he had gone a weird way to get home to sort of make himself stay awake. And
Yeah.
if I'd said something, he would have gone the same way to try and delay getting home to avoid the accident. So we would have been in the same place at the same time, no matter what. But instead of putting on the gas, that led us a little bit in front of him. So it was the rear end that got hit instead of the side of the car completely. I
Oh,
had put on the brakes, which could have still killed my sister and her friend that was on that side of the car. And
wow.
so I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so determining how to read your own intuitions is often a challenge. But I
Yeah.
believe that because of all that that happened, um, my father was going to kill us. We were going to become one of the family annihilate. He was going to be a family annihilator. He was going to kill all of us and
Oh,
then kill himself. And I could tell, and I knew it.
yeah.
And between me and some of the neighbors and stuff, we convinced my mother to leave my father before that happened. So
Oh,
I'm convinced that that saved our lives.
yeah.
And I did not want to leave. I did
Yeah.
not know why I wanted to stay, but I knew I didn't want to go, that I
Mm.
had things I wanted to do, even if I didn't know what they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, when you come from those kinds of experiences, I think that my psychic abilities were so intense, partly because of the danger I was in all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. You had to be sensitive to your environment, right?
Right.
To try
And
to
the
help
energy shifts
navigate.
and so forth about what was going on and what might come, what might be about to happen and so
Yeah.
forth. So
That makes
I
sense.
was
It
very
also
aware.
sounds like you brought a lot of it in with your soul as well. Cause
I do believe so. And I had a
yeah.
funny thing at one point, much farther on, but quite a while ago now, you know, so somewhere in between now and then, um, I had a dream experience, which wasn't a dream, when I remembered before I was born.
Oh,
And I was like this little ball of light and energy, and I was floating, and there was another ball of light that was floating around me, and there was like a bigger ball that was talking. And this voice says, you will forget everything you know until the time comes for you to remember. And then I was born. And I
wow.
was very excited when I woke up from that because I thought, I remembered they told me to forget. And that seems to be the case. It's like the knowledge base that I have on all kinds of magic, like comes from a lot of my past lives.
Hmm.
And it comes to the surface when I'm in need or when someone else is in need. And they say, this
Yeah.
weird thing has happened. What do I do? And all of a sudden, pow, there it is. I got
Yeah.
this information on how to do this technique. And I found that interesting with the planetary stuff because before I met my husband, I never read a book on planetary magic or anything like that. He's a fan of Franz Barden's work
Okay.
and he started off with a ceremonial kind of background before we got together.
Mhm.
And I already knew how to do all that stuff. I spent a lot of time as a kid interacting with the different planets, and I had a spontaneous out of body encounter with the sun,
Ooh.
ironically. I was awake with my sister. We were walking down the street and we were having a rare good day. We were just feeling nice and holding hands, and the sun was shining. And I closed my eyes and I thought about the sun, and I suddenly found myself looking down at the surface of the sun. And I was surprised because it wasn't just a big ball of fire, because that's what they told us it was in school.
Yeah.
And it had like mountains and rivers and valleys. There were different colors of fire and everything that were there. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And so when we got our first actual satellite images of the sun and they started to discover that it wasn't a featureless ball of fire, and they started seeing it, I was like, I saw that before we actually had satellites.
Wow.
So that was very confirming, to
Yeah,
say the
yeah,
least. So I
yeah,
was pretty excited about that. And so, spontaneously having events like that happen was fairly common throughout
yeah.
my young adulthood and so forth.
It's
Um,
interesting. I've had a spontaneous journey to Mars before. And it was like one night I was just hearing Pleiades over and over and over in my mind. And I was like, I guess I gotta look this up. So I look up Pleiades, and the first thing that comes up on Google is Pleiades is conjunct Mars tonight, and it's the closest it's been to Earth in like 85 years. So you can go outside and look at it. So I went out with my just a little binocular, and I looked up and I could see them both. And then I went into a meditation and I just, whoo, I took off. I went to Mars and I went inside. There was a face on Mars, like a temple that was a big head. And I went in through the ear, and it looked like an Egyptian temple inside. And then I walked into a chamber that was inside the eye of the big head. And I looked up through the eye in the ceiling, and it was all made of stone, but the stone was transparent in the ceiling. And I could just see like the entire universe. It was so wild. And
Sounds awesome.
it was really cool. And I've had all these experiences that are kind of interesting like that, but I would always sort of, I just wouldn't make a big deal about it. I mean, it would be cool to me, but I thought, oh, I'm making this up or something,
Well,
and
on the mental plane, anything can exist. And that's the tricky part.
yeah,
Like there really is no actual temple on Mars. That's only on the mental plane and the astral plane that's there. But that
yeah,
doesn't matter because you get to have the experience anyway.
yeah.
And I've interacted, every planet has got its own beings,
Hmm.
but we're the only ones at the moment that have physical bodies. They're all in spirit bodies. And so
Yeah,
you can interact with their energies and so forth and have conversations and whatnot with them, but it's not literal information. When I saw the sun, that was literal, which was cool because I
yeah,
just saw the actual sun. But then there's other experiences that I've had that I know were not.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
I
you
think that's a
have,
problem. People often confuse everything they see with being literal.
right. Yeah, it's interesting because like it's, you could remote view something on Earth, right? And actually be seeing like the physical landscape versus like that experience I just explained, where it's like, well, who knows? Maybe there is something like that there, but um it's interesting how that there's definitely like there's all these different dimensions that we can tap into.
So since you mentioned Mars,
Yeah.
this is my Mars wand.
Oh, cool.
And this is ironwood, since iron is the metal of Mars.
Uh-huh.
And ironwood is interesting in that its sap is red. It looks like blood. And of course, the red of Mars and so forth. So these are all rubies, different kinds of ruby things. This
Uh-huh.
is even ruby matrix. And the piece of wood that came had two ends. So in my mind, this is Mars and its two moons,
Cool.
one smaller, one bigger. But it's like when I make a wand, tuning into the energy so that when I pick that wand up, that's the energy I get. And I discovered a way to connect the energy I've collected from the Mars sphere into the wand to be portable. I had another one of these natural ruby matrix crystals that was too big. I was going to try and put it up there, but it wouldn't work.
Uh-huh.
And so I charged it up with the wand. And when my daughter had to go to court and testify, I gave it to her to put in her pocket to give her strength and courage and protection.
Oh,
She didn't
no.
want to give it back.
She's like, this
I
feels
had
good.
to insist. I said, I didn't give that to you to keep.
Uh-huh.
I gave that to you to use. All right, fine. She took it out of her pocket and gave it back. She liked it a lot.
Yeah.
But that is when we were, the wands, how they work is like it's my associations, my understanding of Mars. Ruby is its stone, red is its color, iron is its metal.
Yeah.
Um, the pentagram is its symbol. So
Mhm.
5 is its number, and that's how you build a magical tool. It's got to have meaning to you. Someone else picking this up, not having those associations with Mars, might not feel the energy that's in it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like it allows me to fine tune my attention, my energy attention to a specific form of energy and then tap into it. So then I'm not using all my own energy all the time. It's one of the things
Ah,
I like about wands.
okay.
I can now use the Mars energy and it has plenty. It's kind of like the earth
Yeah.
has lots of energy, not like
Yeah.
I can deplete it. I'm gonna suck Mars into my wand and it'll fall out of the sky. Yeah, yeah, that's not how that works.
Right.
But it helps to when people first get started on this path, a lot of times people tell them it's just about your will and your imagination and you don't need anything else and you're using your own energy. And I'm like, why would you do that when you
Mhm.
have this collection of different kinds of energies out there, so you're not making yourself sick or depleting your own energy field, and then you're able to access much larger energies than you yourself could generate. And it
Yeah.
isn't just about intentions. There's a whole slew of skill sets that you have to do this stuff effectively. Concentration, focus, clear mind, knowing what you're trying to do and being able to access the specific kind of energy to do it. You know, there's a lot involved, not
Mhm.
just say, by my will, so mote it be, and
Mhm.
then it will be done. Although in an emergency, you might be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you speak the language of the universe. It's, or like the language of nature too, you know?
Well,
The way
that's what being a witch is all about, right?
yeah. And so I love that example you just gave for charging the stone with your Mars wand. Can you give us any other examples of how you've used your planetary wands?
Well, I have a Venusian wand, and this is a piece of myrtle wood. It's my only two-headed wand,
Hmm.
which I didn't, it's interesting. It's like I did not know that I was making a Venusian wand when I started.
Uh-huh.
I was making a healing wand. That was the idea, right? But then I have emeralds, rose quartz, and then I have a red garnet and a green garnet, one end and the other. And then I have a piece of cryoprase in the middle. So I have 7 stones, and 7 is the number for Venus.
Hmm.
Green is the color for Venus. Myrtle wood can be used as a love tool as
Hmm.
well as healing and so forth. And so after I made it and I'm putting the last pieces together and I'm going like, wait a minute, I'm making a Venusian wand. How cool is that? And so then when I started using it, I discovered like this is silk so that I can use the silk to wrap my hand around and not necessarily have to be completely in touch with the wand, because some of the wands are strong enough that they can kind of like interfere with your own energy when you're trying to use them. And I discovered when using it that each end does something different. So the red garnet is emotional healing,
Hmm.
and then the green garnet is for physical healing.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, I have now all of my wands pretty much have got some stone that I've collected that I can use to charge the stone up with so that I can take it with me if I need it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to do that. I'm going to be going to the next total solar eclipse.
Hmm.
I'm going to go to Arkansas to see it.
Oh,
And I
cool.
can't take all my wands with me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take the stones that I've made that are associated with the wand
Uh-huh.
instead. So I can collect the experience and bring it back to my wands and go like, hey guys.
Yeah.
But wands, these are the planetary wands have got, their purpose is to connect you to that energy. But then there's other kinds of wands. So I brought this one to show you. This is a banishing wand.
Mm,
And this is from a piece of rosemary from my garden.
mm.
My rosemary gets so big,
Yeah,
it becomes wood.
huge.
Yeah. And it like witches often put rosemary in front of their house to protect their homestead and stuff. And I think someone made the mistake of trying to attack me.
Mm.
And my rosemary died all of a sudden. It took the hit and it died, and I had to plant a new one. It's now as big as this one was.
Wow.
So I harvested the wood. And since I do the paranormal investigations a lot, I wanted to have something that I could use. And again, I constructed this thing without understanding why I was doing it. It was just an instinct.
Yeah.
This is the second one. The first one was a thinner piece. And so I wanted to make it bigger when I harvested the wood again. So I have like a yellow quartz crystal at the end. And I have these are the ruby and then lapis. I mean, yeah, that's lapis. And then black tourmaline and then tiger eye and carnelian and smoky quartz and obsidian. And then an amethyst doing this weird sticking up thing, followed by another tiger eye. I'm like, why is that amethyst sticking up like that? And then when I was using it to get rid of a shadow person, I figured it out. So the energy comes in, it hits this and goes back, and it becomes an endless loop. So it's stuck inside the wand
Uh-huh.
until I can take it safely outside and stick the end of the wand in the dirt and drain it back to the earth and let it go. And
That's
that
like
keeps
the original Ghostbusters tool.
and it keeps it from getting into me. And that's just
Yeah.
a little added protection at the end, just to make sure that I don't end up having that negative energy in me
Yeah.
deal with later. And
I love it. You're just like, so you can suck up the energy and then diffuse
yep,
it in the earth.
I had one of the guys at prison would not let me touch him with this wand. He had a dual personality, a spirit being or whatever that was afraid of
Oh,
it. And I'm
oh,
like, okay, not going to force it,
interesting. Oh,
but
yeah. Oh,
you know,
as you mentioned that, can you tell us about your work with the prisoners?
okay. So that was one of those things. The way things happened to me, it came to me, and then I decided whether I was going to do it or not. And I never had imagined doing that kind of service work. It never really crossed my mind. It was like nowhere at all. And I got into a car accident and needed some massage therapy for my healing of my whiplash, etc. And I went to see my massage therapist, and her husband, who's an acupuncturist, was working on the chaplain that worked up at the prison. And the chaplain at the prison was looking for someone to do what he called a Wiccan circle. I never could get them to understand that I wasn't a Wiccan.
Okay.
in their thing, pagan, Wiccan, they're the same thing. And it was like, okay, I have to accept their definition, what they think it is, and that will be fine. But every time I saw any of the guys, I always made sure I explained to them what was Wiccan, what was not a Wiccan, and I was not a Wiccan. So I was clear and not making claims that were untrue.
Yeah.
But so he was looking for somebody, and so she gave him my number and gave me his number or something, and we called each other and we met and had coffee. And he was telling us or telling me how difficult it was to find anyone who was an experienced pagan to help with the prisoners that he had that came into the system already pagan.
Mm.
And so I thought, okay, let me see what it is. I had to go through all the steps, of course, the online course and the test that went with that, and then going up to the prison and doing a video course for all the volunteers throughout all the prisons at the same time. They did like a 2-hour presentation. Then I had to come back later, had to be fingerprinted and whatnot. And background check they had to do on me. I guess it was good. I'd never been to jail. Apparently, if you're from jail, you can't go back to jail to help people who are in jail. I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but those are their rules.
Yeah.
And so, then I got permission, and then we had to figure out when I was going to do it and arrange things and so forth, and learn their system. And it was interesting because some of the guards really hated me. They
Mm.
saw me as such a serious threat. They were like, yeah, I was Satan incarnate. When I went, if they were on duty, I got the look. It
Oh
was just like,
man.
wow, all right. But yeah, it was, and I got flack from the pagan community for going up and volunteering because some of them were like, we don't think they deserve to have someone up there because they did something bad. That's why they're in prison.
Yeah.
So why would you be there to help? And I'm like, well, the Christians are there.
Hmm.
And, you know, if that's the only thing that they have available, I mean, we don't know why they're there.
Yeah.
It was a minimum security facility. So in order to be there, you had to have less than 4 years on your sentence, and you had to earn your right to be there by behaving properly in the more intense incarceration sites around the state. Um, you know, so, but yeah, the first time I went, there were a lot of people that showed up because
Hmm.
they were just really super curious. And they were looking, a lot of times people that are incarcerated are looking to see how they can manipulate any volunteer that comes. That's actually a pretty typical
Ah.
behavior on their
Uh-huh.
part. And they did their best to try and see if I was manipulatable. And then the next time I came, I had 5 people. So I weeded them out right out of the bat. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting. And I did this for like 7.5 years, and I'd get different groups of prisoners because they would come and go and so forth. And I did a lot teaching them to do the sacred tree meditation, the healing chant, build their own astral temple, become acquainted with the tools that they couldn't have any tools because, you know, they're in a prison.
Yeah.
Their idea of a wand in the prison was a unsharpened pencil.
Wow.
And actually, towards the end, I got permission to make actual wands for the guys, but I had to keep them. I
Okay.
could bring them with me, and then they could use them while I was there.
Yeah.
But then they couldn't keep them, so I had to like keep them stored and in a special location or what have you, and
Yeah.
whatnot. But you know, we did all of the celebrations, you know, throughout the year, trying to get them in touch with nature. And I've heard from a number of them after they got out. They send me messages, they find me on Facebook and thank me for what I've done for them. And in some cases, they tell me that I've changed their lives
So
by
cool.
giving them this opportunity to have a way to get through it. So a
Yeah.
lot of them were sensitive too. And it's like the facility was like a big giant room with a bunch of bunk beds. They didn't have individual spaces.
Yeah.
So they were like stuck in a room with all these people that, you know, and they would be laughed at if they meditated and, and
Oh
everything
man.
else.
Yeah.
But I was kind of surprised. There was a native medicine man or person who came up there and did sweats. And we never met. He did not want to meet me. He decided that I was bad and we had nothing in common. So I was disappointed in his um, lack of curiosity
Yeah.
to find out the facts
Yeah.
because there is so much in common. I've participated in a lot of native ritual.
Yeah.
There was a medicine wheel weekend 4 years in a row in Okanagan Valley in British Columbia that I went to and met a number of different medicine men and participated in sweat lodges and so forth, and really got a feel for the similarities
Hmm.
between their path and ours, and
Hmm.
the fact that it's nature based. You got to have similarities. If it's based on nature, nature is
Yep.
nature. There
Hmm.
have got to be similarities.
Right.
What you call it might be slightly different, but it's the same energy. So
Yeah.
yeah, I felt very comfortable with their rituals and
Yeah.
participation.
Yeah. I did a Temazcal ceremony in Mexico one time. That's their version of the sweat lodge. And it was absolutely amazing. They put these hot volcanic rocks in the center of this lodge, and they're sprinkling water and herbs on them. And they said it's supposed to like transform all of your cells. And it was so cool because we went around and talked about like past lives that we could remember and our intention and all this stuff. And there was one woman in the lodge that was having a terrible experience. She was like she had a lot going on. And this one lady who was one of the facilitators just kind of let her lay down in her lap and just like comforted her. But I was so blissed out. I couldn't even, it didn't affect me at all. And when we came out, when we were finished, this was like behind this little jungle cabana we were staying in, and we were across the street from the ocean. We all joined hands and we crossed the street and we all went into the ocean under the moonlight. And it was just like, it was so beautiful. It was one of the coolest experiences. And there were so many overlaps with how you call in the directions and just connecting with the elements and the stars. And yeah, that was a really special experience. So, man, yeah, witches get a bad rap. Seems like, you know?
Yep, they definitely seem to still.
Yeah. But that makes me ask too, though. I mean, there are witches that practice dark magic.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
probably a huge reason why. I mean, that's what gets kind of unclear in history is I think it's easy to say maybe people were afraid of these women's power. Maybe they didn't like them being independent and able to make their own medicines and things. But then another part of me has to wonder, like, well, were some of them doing dark magic to people, and that could be a part of why they retaliated, you know?
Well, it's hard to know because most of the
Right.
people that were murdered during the Inquisition had no magic in
Yeah.
particular, except
Yeah.
for understanding nature and making plants or having too much wealth or having too
Yeah.
much position or having too much beauty or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. And the fear and anxiety that was rampant throughout Europe was it was a collective insanity.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to have stopped completely.
Yeah.
There's still collective insanity out there, people who are afraid of things and
Yes.
without checking and understanding what they actually are and
Right.
jumping to conclusions and, making giant boogeymen, you know,
Yeah.
like the big danger, the big evil thing that's trying to kill us all. And, okay, so one of the things that I got from Starhawk that was important was the difference between a power over model, which is what we run on, and the power with model, which is what the ideal should be.
Yeah.
And, power over, the whole point of that is someone has to be on top and have people below them.
Yeah.
And so then those people have to have people below them to feel like they have power and so forth. There's this entire continuum of this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And power with means that, everyone has got equal power, equal respect. And um, it's, we had a business here once where one of the members of one of our employees was a Jehovah Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And he had such a hard time with the idea of us treating everybody equal. It drove him literally insane. He absolutely went out of his mind. And we were very baffled because we couldn't understand it because we mistook. We thought that, people would respond to being treated like they knew what they were doing and that they were in charge of their own schedule and their own stuff and everything else. But in his head, it was like someone had to be in charge, and we obviously weren't
Yeah.
because we weren't making people do things. So then he would try to be in charge
Yeah.
and then tell people what they were supposed to be doing. And we would say, no, you can't do that because that's not your place. So then he would go like, well, then I'm not going to do anything unless somebody tells me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I won't even bring the equipment I need to do a service call unless somebody puts it in my van. And we're like, no, you're not allowed to do that either because it's your responsibility. You know what you're going to fix, you know what you need, and you're supposed to put it in your van instead of wasting gas going there and then having to come back because you expected someone else to figure this out. And he went back and forth. And when we went out of business, he told us it was the worst job he'd ever had in his entire life. He absolutely hated us because we
Being bossy
insisted
enough.
on treating him as an equal. And so that was interesting, experience, a learning
Yeah.
experience, because you're like, what? I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Hmm.
And so it is it's a different way of thinking about things. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so you have a different power base, you have a different set of influences, you
Mhm.
know, you're recognized by a different group of people. You might have more money or more perceived status, but you're still a person and a human being, which doesn't make you better than me,
Yeah.
you know, or anyone else. And the
Yeah.
fact that you think it makes you better is the reason why power over continues to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see this as a great insecurity, an expression of a huge insecurity in the ego, that without accolades and praise or stuff or whatever, they don't have an innate sense of self-worth. It's an externalized sense of self-worth. And
Mhm.
if we could just become healthy, psychologically speaking, as individuals, that
Yeah.
stuff wouldn't matter,
Yeah.
because that's not where it comes from. If it's not in here, it's like you don't have it.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it was kind of interesting way of looking at things. And
Totally. You reminded me of this time I had Jehovah's Witnesses come up to my house in North Carolina, and we lived on top of this mountain, and it was like just beautiful out there. And they're like, well, we what do you believe in God and all this stuff? And I was like, I go, you see that? It was like sunset or something. I was like, you see that out there? I was like, this is God. Like, this is my God, all of this. And they were like, well, don't you want somebody to thank it for? And I go, I thank it every day. I just really had to try to find something wrong with me. They were really trying hard, and I wasn't letting them.
and
They
that's good. That's a good tactic.
they just finally gave up and went away. But it was like, it's an interesting kind of, I wasn't even really like consciously spiritual yet at that point. I was just a farmer, and that's how I felt, you know?
Yeah. I had two Mormons come to my house one day. I was outside in my garden working, and I saw them go by. And it's like they're not hard to spot. You know, they dress alike. There's two young men. They're going out. They've seen me outside. They know I'm home, so I can't like go in the house and pretend I'm not home and not answer the door. And I want to work outside because it's a nice day. So I'm like, okay, they're going to be coming by. So they go to the end of the street, they turn around, they come by, and they start off with like, isn't it a gorgeous day? Well, yes, it's a gorgeous day. Oh, you have such a wonderful garden. I said, thank you very much. And then they said, so do you mind us asking what church you go to? I said, well, actually, that's none of your business.
Mhm.
And they kind of stopped for a minute, and they're like, well, okay, I guess we can't go that way and tell them what's wrong with her church. Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's no answer I can give that's going to get me in a good spot
Yeah.
with these people. And it is really none of their business. I'm
Mhm.
old enough to have made up my own mind and decided for myself where I want to be. And I have. And so then they offer me a copy of the Book of Mormon, which they hand out like candy. And I've got copies of it in my library because I've gotten other copies before. So they want to give it to me to give me something in energy exchange. And I said, well, no, thank you. I said, I already have a copy. So
Yeah.
then they're stopped again. And because they can't now do that. And they're trying to think of what to do. And I have to paraphrase here because I cannot remember what this guy said. But
Yeah.
basically, he says, I really want to encourage you to read the Book of Mormon because it's turned me from a raging asshole into the wonderful person you see before me now. And I'm paraphrasing because he didn't use those words, of course.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and says, I'm so glad you found something that works for you. And then they stood there baffled and then they left. And
Yeah. Well, that's the
I
thing.
was
It's
very
like,
pleased with myself. I thought I handled
yeah.
that really well and it worked. It's sort of like
Yeah.
verbal Tai Chi. It's like I kept
Yes.
deflecting back. And that's how a lot of interactions that, that what they try to do is they're looking for a hook, you know,
Yeah.
they're sending out a barb, a hook, and they're trying to get you to join in and
Mhm.
participate in it. And they just kept sending out hooks and I kept not accepting them. I had a straight line and they just kept going back. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that people understood, that that's what's happening. They
Mhm.
might be less likely to get hooked in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because
Yeah.
we're all, culturally, I feel like a lot of people are just people pleasers, right? We're like, you know, and
Oh,
it,
don't
there,
want to make waves, don't want to upset people, making
yeah,
sure that they have a nice day, don't want to think badly of me, and etc. It's like, especially women, we're
yep,
often trained to put everyone else ahead of ourselves as a general rule.
yep,
Obviously, not all people are like that, but yeah, it is very culturally embedded
mhm,
in everything we see and do.
yeah.
And yeah, so I was very non-cooperative, but also completely non-compliant and non-participatory and non-violent. So
I would say you were just being sovereign, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
well, I'm at this point, it's like when they used to come to our door, and I'm thinking, I didn't invite you to come to my house. I
hmm,
don't know who you are. If
yeah,
I was interested in your church, I would go to your church
yeah,
and I would interact with you there. And and one of the other tactics is yelling at you, which I find bizarre.
yeah.
Uh, I think they were Jehovah Witnesses that came to my door one day. It was an older man and a younger man, so not the Mormons. And it's my day off. I'm in my house coat. I go to the door. I see these people, and we have signs that says no proselytizing, no soliciting. And so first thing I ask is, are you solicitors? And they said, no. I said, are you proselytizers? And the older guy says, I have been trained. I said, then I'm not interested. And I closed the door. And then he starts screaming through my door at me saying, what's the matter with you? Don't you like the Bible? And I thought to myself, did you not see I was wearing my house coat? Where
Yeah,
in your pea brain did you think I was A, going to invite you into my house with me
yeah,
wearing my house coat, or I was going to step outside onto my porch into the neighborhood wearing my house coat? It's
yeah,
like, hello.
yeah,
I just shook my head and didn't respond. It's like, I don't care what you think. Yeah, maybe I do hate the Bible. I don't know. None
yeah,
of your business.
yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, I think it just shows the shadow side as well. You know, those people, like that guy said, this changed my life. So he's going out trying to spread the news or like, but it's like, no, it's not your job to change other people. Like
The only
you can
person who can
invite
change is
people.
yourself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
it's true. You can only change yourself. You can't change anyone else,
yeah. And then you can
even with
just,
magic.
yeah, and then I think of you like your YouTube channel, you've got quite a big following and you're out there just speaking your truth, sharing your knowledge. You're not trying to convert anybody to anything.
I'm
And what
really
I love,
seriously trying not to become a cult leader. And I watch for signs of that. Like, no, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life or what to do. That's
yeah.
your job, not mine. And
But
leave
what
me
I
out of
think
it.
is amazing is how your channel has obviously gotten popular because of that. People, so the
Apparently, people wanted some authenticity. And the reason I started the channel in the first place was just to share what I had learned, because
yeah,
I noticed in books, a lot of what I know isn't in books.
yeah,
And then on, chat rooms and groups and stuff on Facebook, etc., a lot of the questions that people have are either not answered correctly or are answered wrong. And there's a lot of misinformation. Like one of the my biggest pet peeve, I guess you would call it, is the question is like, what element are you? And I'm like, I'm sorry, if you're not all five elements, you're not alive. What do you mean? What element are you? And this idea that everyone has an affinity to a single element, the craft, of course, didn't help with that, because
okay,
each one had to be one of the elements in order for them to have a complete circle. I'm like,
yeah,
seriously, that's stupid. And the idea is to be balanced in yourself between all of the elements,
yeah.
the earth, air, fire, water, and spirit,
Mhm.
so that you're having a more conscious existence. And I always, would type in like, I have to respond to this. You're, I don't care what sign you are. That's not your element, just the
Yeah,
sign that you're in.
yeah.
And so that was one of the things that made me decide to do the channel,
I love it. That's
to
often what
correct this
happens.
misinformation that's out there.
Yeah, and I see that happen too, where like say you start sharing your own thing and somebody else is like, "Wait, hey, wait, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, it's triggering this thing in you. Like I want to share what I know and maybe, like I've just noticed like when you step into having an interest or having a truth to share, people are like, if they haven't quite found that yet, they're kind of like triggered by that. So you were kind of
They
like,
feel insecure. Yeah.
yeah,
How
yeah.
can they know that? I don't know that.
Yeah,
But
but then I like how you were getting kind of mad about all this like misinformation and that like frustration it seems like was a drive for you to create something, which I love. That's alchemy. you
that's
know?
true. Yeah, you just use your energy to do something with it. Well, my philosophy, I'm very practical.
Hmm.
And so if there's a problem, if you're not looking for a solution, what's the point?
Yeah.
If you're looking for someone to blame about it, then that means you're just trying to say you're smarter than someone else and you knew that that was wrong to start with. But
Yeah.
if no one ever gave anyone the actual information, it's not that they're stupid,
Uh-huh.
it's that they haven't been able to access good information. So
Yeah.
put out good information and then people can decide for themselves if they're going to use it or not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I like your word sovereignty,
Mhm.
because that's what I want everyone to have. Their
Yeah.
own, not mine.
Yeah. And I think that's in my mind, like I feel like that's the lessons that are on the table for humanity right now. Just more recently, it feels like there's sort of a split between people who choose to be sovereign and have their own authority and make their own decisions and take responsibility for their life. And then we've got people who don't want that, who want to be told what to do.
Or want
And
to be the ones who tell the others what to do.
yes, that too. So I feel like this has been the situation for humanity since the beginning.
Well, there was a better thing way, way before, but
Okay.
it's been like this for a long time.
Yeah.
And the thing is that a lot of times people see that pattern and it's constantly repeating. So the notion becomes there's nothing we can do. It's just going to keep on happening like that. And I say, why?
Mhm.
Why can't we have a better decision-making process? Why can't we have a different approach to what
Yeah.
we're doing? We don't have to accept this as the fate for all time. We can
Yeah.
actually make those transformations and so forth. And, they may seem overwhelming if you are, think about the entire picture and think, what can I do? I'm just one person out of what, 8 billion now. But the thing is that you affect all the people that are around you.
Mhm.
And without knowing it, I've affected a lot of people. The channel I'm affecting more, but just in my life,
Yeah.
being myself wherever I lived and trying to be present with people that I'm with
Mhm.
has an effect on
Yeah.
them. And so if everyone is just becoming themselves and doing that part, it will have a collective effect
Yeah.
down the road.
And I think
And
that's already starting to shift. I really do feel that. And I
I
I don't
certainly hope so.
well, I'm an eternal optimist, but I don't
So
know
am
if
I, weirdly enough.
I'm
All
not
evidence
saying
to the
you weren't,
contrary.
but have you ever studied like Rupert Sheldrake and the morphogenetic field?
No, but I was thinking of the 100 monkey.
Yes, yeah, same scenario. Like if more people are making this sort of neural pathway of humanity easier, then it might be easier for people to jump on that highway, you
Yeah,
know?
if
And
enough people shift, more people will shift.
yeah,
And you see that in cultural changes and stuff right now. There's some people that are trying to go back to a previous paradigm,
yeah,
because they're uncomfortable with the one that everybody suddenly shifted into,
yeah,
like gay rights and women's rights and all that other stuff that we made progress in, accepting people as individuals, et cetera, et cetera, and all that jazz. So but you see, like, all of a sudden it's like no, they can't get married, no, they can't get married, no, they can't be married. Like, well, why can't they get married? I don't see any reason why they can't be married.
yeah,
Well, why don't we let them get married? okay, they should get married and have all the problems we have. And you can actually, you can track that thinking, through the country. And it's like, yeah, and that's like an example of that 100th monkey,
Yeah.
whatever, shift in awareness.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to watch. But I'm annoyed, of course, with the attempt to try and put the genie back in the bottle
Yeah.
and
Yes.
make us be worried and afraid of things that don't matter. That's the thing that gets me. It's like there's things out there that matter.
Yeah.
There's like, climate change that matters. There's poverty that matters. There's a lot, healthcare matters. All those things, matter for humans and for the planet and everything else. Who someone loves doesn't matter. What someone does with their own body doesn't matter. It's not your business. It is that attempt to control other
Right.
people is what its root, and fear is the thing that feeds it.
Yeah.
Insecurity and fear. So hopefully we'll just keep on going the right way, and eventually their voices will become less and less instead of more and more. I think the closer we get to succeeding at that, the louder they yell.
Yes.
And that's what I'm hoping. That's what I feel is happening, is like they know that their time is done and they don't want to accept it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're making a lot of noise. But we have to remember, us, the quiet voices, we have as much, if not more power
Mhm.
to maintain change and to get things back on track.
Yeah, and if you look at like there's a woman named Veda Austin who's doing a lot of studies about water and the structure of water. It's the natural structure of water and the natural structure of nature has this incredible power to overcome dissonance. And so I feel like the more people, it doesn't have to be a majority of people even, but the more people that are getting in tune with that power of nature and the structure of it and the cycles, it is so powerful. Like that energy to be able to shift things. And I just think it's amazing. I feel like nature can recover from anything.
Well, it's really cool that they've discovered that trees talk to each other,
Mm,
literally, through the mycelial network under the ground. They communicate what's going on in their neighbor, in their part of the woods,
yeah.
and other trees will respond to the information and change their chemical makeup to protect themselves from an invading enemy that's on the way,
Mhm.
or they'll even change the direction of their nutrients when they know that they're dying. A dying tree will actually shift its nutrient flow. Instead of bringing stuff up into itself, it spreads its nutrients out into the ground to the other trees that are around it to give
Wow.
them a boost in its death. And this is not conjecture at this point. This is just scientific fact.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool one. And I love that fact. But you
Yes.
wanted me to talk about the trees, so that seems to be a pretty good segue.
Yes, into your tree experience.
And
I
I've always been in attached to nature and been comfortable with trees from a kid. I did a lot of climbing of trees and sitting in trees and so forth. Um, but when I was in Saskatchewan, I was going through a divorce of my second husband, and things were dark. I mean, I was very confused and very upset, and I wasn't sure how I was going to, I have two children I have to take care of. He's going to make me leave my house because he said it's my house. I pay for this house, which means I can come into this house anytime I want to, making me feel incredibly unsafe, that kind of thing. And I was just sort of shattered emotionally. And I was sitting on the back porch of that house and just crying my heart out. I just didn't have any hope. Um, I just didn't feel very good or positive at all. And when I was in the middle of that despair, I suddenly felt this amazing, loving, warm embrace encircle me, like wrap its arms around me. And it was so different from how I felt. It made me stop crying. I could not maintain the space I was in the face of this other energy. And so I looked around and I'm like, where's this coming from? And I realized it was coming from the tree in my backyard.
Mhm.
And so I started talking to the tree and thanking it for it. And then I was thinking, I must be going out of my mind. I'm talking to a tree. And the voice in my head said, no, you're becoming sane for the very first time.
Mm.
And this was the moment where I knew there were other forms of consciousness out there, not just humans. Because
Mhm.
this tree was aware of my existence and aware of my feelings and my suffering and had compassion for me and loved me just exactly how I was, broken and all.
Mhm.
And that was the thing that helped me get away from judgment by other people,
Mhm.
because, people are really quick to criticize everyone, apparently. It's just like, and the insecurities that we have don't thrive under that. But I became aware of the fact that there's the whole bunch of different forms of consciousness that are out there, and that the trees are a huge part of that.
Mm.
And so it started to heal that part inside of me, that because when I was a kid, I felt there was something wrong with me because of all the things that happened to me, that there must be, the universe must hate me, that there was something so broken in me that I would be treated that way. And this was like the opposite.
Mm.
This was the universe saying, no, you're not broken, you're injured, and
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with you except what people have done to you, but we're not people.
Mhm.
And we can love you just the way spot of healing, which then later informed all my wand.
Oh no.
That
You're-
it's like he froze. Did you freeze?
Yeah, it froze for
There
a
you
minute.
are.
Yeah. Oh
Your
man.
tree.
It's like the energy of the tree came in, or it was so powerful.
Thanks again.
Okay. I think you're with me
All right.
again. Yeah, so it froze when you said this tree like embraced you and you realized that it just loved you. That there's nothing wrong with you.
Okay. And so that helped to start my healing process, because then I had a life form, a consciousness or whatever, that accepted me just exactly how I was. And, said that although I was injured and broken, I wasn't bad.
Yeah.
There wasn't something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so, and that went forward to the first wand I ever made, was the cedar tree that I sat under for a year every day, meditating, and became really close to. And when they made me leave and we're going to cut down that part of the forest, I wanted to keep a piece of that tree spirit with me. And so I made the arrangement to meet the tree at the appropriate time and cut a branch, and it agreed to leave its spirit alive inside the wood. And I took that with me. So all of my wands that I have were cut the same way, with the tree's permission and with the knowledge of what I was going to use it for, and an offering and that kind of thing. So they're alive. So it's like, yeah, I'm working not just with a piece of wood, but I'm working with the life form that was in the piece of wood, who's helping to make it work better, kind of
Yes.
thing.
And
And
I
I
love
think,
your reverence with the offerings and the timing and asking permission. It's just so beautiful.
and it's interesting how a single experience can inform your magic for your life.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's what that did. It's like, that's how we grow our own particular path and our own magic, the choices that we make and the things that happen to us, how we view them, and then what we choose to do with that later becomes our path. And I think that, the me and the universe, we've got a really pretty good open communication pathway at this point.
Mhm.
And the universe knows what I'm made of, and it doesn't make me do something I don't want to, or even offer me now anything I don't want to do, pretty much.
Mhm.
But it's always testing you, and it's not testing you to judge you. Like when I got out of the negative relationships, the last person I was with was very similar to all the other people, like too intense male energy, ego involvement, emotional instability and whatnot.
Mhm.
And so when I finally got out of that, before my husband and I got together,
Mhm.
there was one more option that the universe showed me, because they're like, well, you've always picked these kinds of people before. I mean,
Yeah.
we have like history of this kind of personality, and you've always said yes to it. Are you sure this isn't what you want?
Yeah.
And so it showed me one more, and I was like, no, I definitely don't want that. I've decided I don't want that. And it was right after that that my husband and I met,
Wow.
and we've been together ever since. So that was in 1991. And so, the universe isn't, the tests that the universe does is to gather information
Mhm.
basically about who you are, what you want, what you need,
Mhm.
what you're willing to accept, what you're going to do, and so forth. It's not like judging whether you're good or bad. It's like, okay, what kind of a life form are you and what do you require?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that individual relationship we have with the universe. So every time we make a choice, we're picking a path.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm careful about what I do. My ethics, my personal ethics are important to me. And in every decision I make, I try to think it through and such. So yeah.
As you're speaking about this, I'm just getting like the most beautiful visuals. Like when you were talking about how everybody kind of develops their own path, even just from like one, really amazing experience, I could see like a mountain and how there's a water source on the top, but there's all these different streams coming down the different sides and like the different perspectives we develop and how we can all be,
Heading towards the same fountain.
yes, and then with the decisions and your ethics, I see tree branches and, which way am I going to branch off here? But your ethics are like your trunk. That's like your structure and your foundation and where you're working from, you know?
My core.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. And I've definitely experienced the same thing with relationships where I can see sort of a repeat coming up or something, or even something else that I've dealt with is having somebody similar come into the picture in my life. And I'm being challenged to not just judge it right away, too. Like to lump people all in one category, like to just keep an open mind and trust myself to discern, you know?
Oh, discernment is such a difficult power to develop.
It is. It is.
And that is just so critical.
Yes.
I mean, that's at the core, really. Discernment is at the core of being able to communicate with other life forms, knowing that they're external from you or not.
Mhm.
Are they your inner voice? Are they an outer voice? All of that has to do with discernment and whether or not it's at your core or whether it's actually someone else. I have, there's been this tendency in the new age thinking kind of process that everything in the universe is just a reflection of your inner reality and that you're projecting it all on them. And I disagree completely with that, because that means that you have no ability to actually make a choice or perceive. If you meet someone who's bad, and there are bad people,
Mhm.
then if you have that kind of thinking, that means that what you're seeing is something bad in yourself. And if you've done the work and you know there's not anything in there, there's nothing wrong with discerning.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's the difference between judgment and judgmentalism,
Yeah.
and critical thinking and criticism. They're not the same thing, and they're important. If you're
Yeah.
going to develop your own path, you have to decide what kinds of people are okay, and if you're always questioning your own ability to to see a sociopath, for example,
Yeah.
because by that thinking, if you see a sociopath and recognize them, then you are also a sociopath. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
It falls apart very readily as a logic thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to go very far into the logic to discover its lack of roots,
Yeah.
kind
I
of
think
thing.
I think people get it confused because there is something in when you are, say, triggered by somebody's behavior, it could be showing you a shadow aspect of yourself sometimes, right? But then I think people kind of conflate it with this like, well, everybody's an exact mirror of you, you know?
Right, exactly. And that's not true. Again, there's levels
Yeah.
of reality in there. And Yeah, I actually got pretty good at being able to notice who was a sociopath. I
Oh.
actually was able to identify them because they actually tell you exactly who they are. They'll say it with humor. They'll
Hmm.
tell you a horrible thing that they would like to do and then say, just kidding.
Ah. Oh, that's a good tip. I didn't get chills, but that's like chilling.
Yes, just kidding. So I've come to the point where I'm now accepting that when people speak, I should listen
Hmm.
to what they're saying and
Yeah.
believe it. And that helps me to avoid certain people. I had that happen in my office where a chiropractor came in, and the way he talked about clients, it was just a brief conversation. I'm like, I'm a massage therapist in a chiropractor's office. You're a new chiropractor here. I'm looking forward to, getting to work with you, referring people and so forth. And his response was like, you refer people to me and then I refer them to you. That's how it works.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, so you don't care about your patients? Because I'm the best therapist in town and I can help them feel better, but that's not your focus. Then he said other weird things about his former wife, who was now being a nanny for his kids. And I mean, it was just quite a mess. So I
Hmm.
went and warned the chiropractor who I've been working with for years. And I
Yeah.
says, I just want you to know this man is a sociopath and bad things will happen just so that you're aware of it. And they didn't believe me.
Oh,
And I
I
turned
was
out to
worried
be,
you were going to say that. That
yes.
seems to be the case most of the time.
And they didn't, well, that's I call it the Cassandra syndrome.
Okay.
People like me, where we see things and we tell other people. Cassandra is a Greek uh, woman who was cursed by the gods to always know what was going to happen and have no one ever believe her.
Oh,
She predicted the Trojan War. She told them all not to
okay.
do it, that it was a bad idea. They did it anyway.
Yeah.
So, the number of times that that's happened to me where I've said, okay, here's what's going to happen. And yeah. And then it happens. And I'm like, here we go again.
Yeah.
They don't believe me. But, you just do what you can and hope for
Well,
the
that
best.
kind of comes back to that discernment too, where
Exactly.
sometimes we have to go through stuff to develop our discernment because we have to learn through our own experience rather than,
Making mistakes.
yeah, yep. But what did this guy end up doing?
Oh, I actually ended up helping him to lose his chiropractic license. He left the business. He took some of their clients with him. He didn't pay them the money that he owed them. And then he injured a client that
Oh,
I was working on. And so we all turned him in and I ended up testifying to the chiropractic board
wow.
and got his license pulled, which is not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I think I assisted in that. I don't know if I put him in a mirrored box or not. I might have, because putting someone in a mirrored box the way I do it, it sort of ramps up the consequences of your actions, whether they're good or bad.
Hmm.
So I like using that one, for defense kind of thing if I need to, because that way, if I'm wrong, I'm not harming the person. I'm actually increasing
Ah,
the good stuff because they've earned it.
yeah. Yeah.
And if I'm right, then they're going to get consequences quicker and protect my community.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he almost killed this woman.
Wow.
And so, someone who is harming other people, I feel defense is important and protecting the community. I did that to a doctor that we had here too, and he also lost his license.
Wow.
But he was attacking someone physically. He broke down a door with an axe. There was all kinds of stuff going on,
Oh
and
my gosh. You
yeah, it was very
quite the
strange.
eventful life.
And she came to me for help, but this brings up another thing. It's like,
Uh-huh.
so she comes to me for help and I find out what's going on. I agree, this sounds like it. And I do this particular spell and I bury it in the dunes and let it do its thing and don't think about it anymore. But she couldn't do her part, which was to confront him and not let him continue to abuse her. There was a whole different component in there,
Mhm.
which he later ended up going to jail for,
Wow.
but not here in town. But once I did that and it worked, she never spoke to me again.
Huh.
And I have had this happen to me numerous times when people who aren't magically inclined,
Yeah.
come to a witch or a practitioner of maybe any kind and ask for help,
Mhm.
and they're wanting you to do something for them, you agree to do something, it works, then they're going like, oh my God, it worked. They
And then
have
they're scared.
power. That means they could do something to me. Oh my
Mm.
God. Or they just don't want to consider the fact that, yes, some people have power and can have a more concrete relationship with the universe and get something done.
Yeah.
And it is a funny thing. So, I
Yeah.
don't take it personally, but
Yeah.
I noticed it rather frequently. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's the end of that. They used me up and I did what they wanted and I did something to help them. And now it's like, okay, let's please go in the way in the background and don't come out into my consciousness anymore, because then I might have to think about how that works.
Uh-huh. That might change
What,
my whole reality.
and that might mean me have, yes,
I might have to change. Yeah.
I might have to change my thinking here.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Wow. But yes, it is an interesting thing. But it's like when I do spell work, it's always an immediate need, either for someone else, usually for
Yeah.
someone else rather than myself. But
Gotcha.
ritual I did for myself in the beginning, like we talked about,
Yeah.
because that's
I'm
really powerful.
yes. Would you like to share? Do you have any stories around ritual that have helped you a lot? Do you have any stories around that?
Well, I could tell you the story of how I learned how to open a portal between the worlds.
Sure. Is this safe for everyone to know?
Well, okay, this happened in Texas, along where I got my staff. So it's sort
Okay.
of connected to my
Where in
staff.
Texas? I'm curious. I'm from Texas.
It was actually Tyler, Texas
Oh,
was one of the places I was at, and I think
that's
that's
not
around the community where this took place. When I was channeling up in northern British Columbia, these people wrote to me, and they were having trouble on their property,
Mhm.
and negative things were taking place,
Yeah.
and people were getting sick and all this other stuff. They were having trouble like selling it or clearing it or whatever,
Mhm.
and they asked my Moita, the spirit I channeled, what was going on. She told them it was an interesting story. There was a woman healer who'd come, and she focused on making a fire around herself whenever she meditated, to the point where she created a fire elemental that looked like her. That was part of the problem. That was harming people. People were actually seeing her in parts of town where she wasn't. It was that kind of a manifestation.
Whoa.
And so that was one thing. And then there was a warrior party that got killed, native party, and they were the other part of it. They were like, looking, they were just causing damage just because of who they were, where they were, and they were not in the right place they needed to be. And she told them what they needed to do was to find a witch to do a ritual in order to like clear, send them on and to stop the elemental from doing its damage and fix it.
Mhm.
And then they didn't find anyone. And so my kids were in Saskatchewan visiting their father, and a voice in my head says, go to Texas. And I went like, what? Go to Texas. I'm like, who do I know in Texas? And I think of these people, and there's some other people that have been writing to us up in British Columbia. And I'm like, so I call them up on the phone. I says, apparently I'm coming to Texas. I'm going to be there this day. And I brought my former partner, David, with me. We had broken up by then, but I wanted him to be involved in this,
Mhm.
um, just because. And so we got on a plane in Vancouver and went to Texas. Had series of amazing experiences, got my staff, did that healing, etc. Um, and when I went to the property, the most fascinating thing happened. The universe, like I said, was so good at arranging this. It's sort of unbelievable. It sounds like I'm making this up but it happened.
Yeah.
The people that had come from Virginia Beach, the woman had been in the Edgar Casey Foundation and had moved a group of people to Texas. And there were two women that had known her throughout the time she was there. One had been with her for like 10 or 11 years. Another one had been with her for like 5 years. Both of them called that house that I was in on
Mhm.
the property.
Mhm.
They don't know why they called, but I got to talk to both of them about what they saw and what I got all the information that I needed about the situation from the actual sources of information. And this is, of course, long before the internet.
Yeah.
This is how the universe worked before the internet.
Yes.
And so, these people come, and I'm like, okay, so I know I'm going to do a big ritual, and I'm going to use the cone of power to pierce the veil between the worlds, to open up the portal to the other side, so that these spirits can see the light on the other side and go where they're supposed to go. This is
Gotcha.
not confrontational or anything like that. This is
Yeah.
an opportunity. Here's what you're looking for. Here it is, go forth and do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up, there were 13 other people besides me. And I was worried because, it was the time of year when chiggers and things like that are out. And I'm like, I'm asking the goddess to help out so that I can focus on this ritual, because this is an important thing I'm going to do for these people. So I'm petitioning the powers that be, to see what they could do. So we ended up doing this in the middle of a thunderstorm outside.
Whoa.
So we're standing in a circle outside, and I've set up our stations, the altars for each element and so forth. And, I call in the earth. Well, first, I guess I called in the air. When I called in the air, the huge wind came flying through our circle.
Mhm.
When I called in the water, we had a downpour, just instant downpour. I called in the fire and I lit the candles. We had lightning going across the sky, and I didn't expect the candles to stay lit, and they did. In the middle of wind and rain, they stayed on fire.
Wow.
And when I called in the earth, of course, we had this like thunder rolling underneath us and shaking the entire place. So I was pretty excited at this point. I was so in the zone, like
Yeah.
in tune with the energies in the universe around me. Whatever I did happened. I was like, I wasn't doing it. I was just like expressing what was going to happen, like being completely in the moment.
Yeah. You were like
There was
channeling
nothing.
those elements, or you were in flow with them, right?
I was in the moment, in flow, in touch with everything that was happening. So that was pretty exciting. So
Yeah.
then we start chanting and singing and building up the energy, and and I'm doing a pretty good job of that. And then at some point, we all scream, and I focus that energy up through the top and open up the portal, and I can see it.
Yeah.
Then I see the spirits, the natives, going up into it and crossing over. And when they crossed over, we had ball lightning explode above us in a 360-degree explosion, like bam, like that. And I was
Wow.
like, they went through. That was pretty exciting. they they
Wow.
went through. So then I'm like, okay, we're done. And then I'm wait a minute, we're not done, because there's still this fire elemental. And I'm thinking, oh, right. And I look across from me, because I'm in the north and the fire is in the south. And I'm seeing this form that's there. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do with this? How do I help it? Well, we'll put it back into the center of the planet where there's the biggest fire, right? Let it become fire again, because in its form it's causing problems. And so I call it into the center of the circle. And as I called it in, those candles tipped over towards the center of the circle and went out.
Whoa.
The only time they moved was at that exact moment.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
like
Wow.
pretty excited. And they come into the center, or the spirit comes into the center, and I visualize the fire going down into the ground. And then we're done. And one of the women that was there was like an extreme clairvoyant.
Mhm.
She had visions. She couldn't tell if they were real or not unless other people were standing next to her
Hmm.
that weren't seeing what she was seeing, or were
Gotcha.
seeing what she was
Whoa.
seeing. And she saw all of that
Wow.
exactly as I felt it.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awesome.
That's amazing.
And so after that happened, it was like I just gained the ability to open up that portal whenever I needed it,
Yeah.
and
To
then
help
close it afterwards.
cross.
It was kind of like I didn't have to do a big giant ritual to get it
Wow.
done. And I'm like, this would have made the best movie scene ever, and no one would have believed it was real. I don't even know if special effects have caught up to what happened to us.
I love it.
And could like make that happen. That was
Yeah.
just like phenomenal. And everybody there was just like, we were all like in shock, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
bet.
that was pretty powerful.
That is like, I just want to be like, magic is real, y'all. It's real.
Yes. And I'm like, hey, anytime you need me for something like that, just, call me up and say, hey, go there. It's like, I'm so glad I listened to that voice that said, go to Texas. Who knew
Yes.
that all
Yeah.
this? And of course, then I got my staff. I had my staff by that point. I
Yeah.
had met the woman in her house and done the healing on her. And so I met all these people that were there, except for one. One of the women who had been there before brought a granddaughter, which was a little bit of a surprise because I had met every single person who was going to be in the ritual and explained to them what was happening. And then all of a sudden there's a new person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here's what's going to happen. And I'm telling her about it. And I said, and you're on your own. If you're going to have a freak out attack with this, you're on your own. I don't have time to deal with you because you didn't even get invited to do this thing in the first place. And, so just letting you know, whatever happens, you have to deal with it yourself.
How did she deal with it?
Well, as far as I know, she was fine. I
Oh,
haven't heard
good.
anything negative. She
Yeah.
seemed to be okay afterwards. She was worried that it was going to be like a confrontational kind of thing,
Yeah.
with the spirits. And I said, no, I'm not going to
Oh,
force them to go over to
yeah.
the other side.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't they?
Right.
They don't
Right.
want to be here. This isn't where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
That always seemed like a sensible thing to
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
that's how I do, my paranormal work. Like I've never had a spirit refuse to go once they see it. Like
Yeah.
these are the people you're waiting to see. These are your loved ones that you
Yeah.
expected to come for you. This is the place that they've made just for you. And all of them are different, which is fascinating to me.
Mhm.
Every single one that I've done, they're going to a different place. And I think it's very much like the movie, What Dreams May Come.
Mm.
Everyone makes their own heaven, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
or their own afterlife. Because, some of them have been like on windswept cliffs on a house. Some of them have been tree-lined avenues. Some have been like a cabin in the middle of a meadow. I mean, everyone has been different. And so it's been very interesting to experience that.
That's so cool. I had a similar sort of calling before. I actually have an episode about it on the podcast where my friend invited me to Sedona and we ended up going out there, and before the trip I had all of these Native American spirits visiting me in my dreams and telling me what I was going to be doing, and I was just like, I can't believe this. But then when we got there, I just like channeled this whole ceremony from them, and we went and we had this incredible experience. And so you're leaving some clues for me too, because like you said, after that happened, then you had this ability, and I'm like, I'm going to tuck that in my back pocket actually, because I don't try to necessarily repeat what we did because I haven't seen any reason to. I think we were doing work with that specific piece of land with the vortex there. But it's cool to know, like, oh yeah, maybe after you've sort of been initiated through something, then you can keep that in your little bag, your kit.
Well, I don't know how many portals I've closed since
Yeah.
then. Seriously, I went into one house and their entire living room floor was an open portal.
Whoa.
And there were spirits coming in all the time. Some of them stayed for a while. Some of them just glared at them. Some of them just traveled through to see what the heck is this thing, you know. But yeah, that one was interesting to close.
So what were they experiencing in their house
Oh,
having?
we're talking, okay, there was a room that I could hear a radio playing music from the 40s.
Huh.
There was no radio.
Oh.
They had the spirit beings that were coming in. They had a sort of a haunted pool table that
Uh-huh.
had collected some pretty serious energy. It was gorgeous. I mean, it had these lion feet and heads around it. I mean, it was just a beautiful thing to look at. It was huge. but there's some really serious negative energy there. They had the open portal in the middle of the living room. The husband had tried to connect with a spirit being, and then it had pushed him out of his body and taken over his body.
Oof.
So, they used the Ouija board, I think, for that, which was an
Uh-oh.
ill-advised method for
Yeah.
them, especially since they didn't know what the heck they were doing.
Right.
Um, there was also an energy ley line that was going through their kitchen that shattered their French glass doors. They just
Whoa.
like shattered and fell apart.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of stuff to do in there. I had to there was like it was about every kind of manifestation you can think of was happening there, and I had to.
Oh,
And then
wow.
after I got the spirit that was stuck in the bedroom. There was a shadow person in the bathroom, I think, in that place. And when I got the shadow person out, there was a human spirit that had killed herself that was there, and then I had to cross her over. And that was interesting to find out. I've had that happen twice,
Yeah.
where I've gotten rid of a shadow person and found a human spirit underneath that they had
Interesting.
occupied. So it seems to be, there's something there.
Yeah.
And, so I had to reroute the ley line. I got rid of the portal. I got rid of the spirits that were stuck. I sealed the place up, the ghost proofing the ritual that I do, so
Okay.
that they would not come back.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, don't come back here. This is like a no-go zone. And then I did some cedar. I used the cedar boughs steam to help get rid of the death energy. That's what they used up north where I was.
Okay.
If someone died in the house, they would put cedar boughs in a pot of boiling water and then walk the steam around the house, and it would get rid of that leftover death stuff and
Yeah.
close portals probably too.
Yeah.
Um, and so I left some cedar berries that I had on the pool table because I grounded it out pretty well, but there still seemed to be some residual stuff. And the woman called me a couple of days later. She says, "Are these things supposed to explode?" I said, "Well, it must have filled it up enough that it couldn't take any more. So just keep putting them on there until they stop exploding.
Okay.
And then you'll know it's gone."
Whoa.
So that was a surprise. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, apparently I did not know that because it had never happened before. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So, but that's the thing, is like I had to discern different kinds of energy there. All
Yeah.
there was not just one thing happening.
Yeah.
And that's the trick, is to be able to separate them out and figure out, take care of one thing, then there's other things. And I've had houses where nature spirits have been trapped inside and can't get out.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it seems to happen, like there's something about the construction of a house, especially the corners,
Oh,
that there, it seems like there should be an exit, but there isn't, and they get stuck in corners. And I did one local place, and they never told me that the young boy said there was a monster under his bed. I didn't know that. I was
yeah.
just going through and, checking things out, and I saw it under the bed. I'm like, "What are you doing under there?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be under there." And so I used a piece of selenite to lead it out of the house. And the
Yeah.
very first thing that kid did when he came home from school was go to his room and tell his mother that the monster under his bed was gone.
That's
And I
amazing.
was like, how wonderful. What a verification that was,
Yeah.
that of what I felt and saw and did. And he immediately knew. So yeah,
And
it's
wild
interesting.
kids, they're tuned in to, they haven't fully entered this physical reality yet, right? So like they're still
Well, they
tuned.
haven't been convinced that it doesn't exist.
Right.
They haven't had their brain trained to not see it and to ignore the input.
Yeah.
And your brain, what we see is what we've taught our brain is there,
Mhm.
because there's lots of input that comes that we immediately ignore and don't pay attention to, because the brain has determined that this is erroneous information that we don't need.
Yeah.
And, it's like, don't do that. Don't pay attention to that. And I've started the practice of trying not to do that. Just
Yeah.
how I opened up my clairvoyant abilities again,
Yeah.
is practicing allowing my brain to have the input without trying to dilute it or change it or reduce it or block it or whatever. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting.
It takes a lot of trust, doesn't it?
No, not being afraid
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're dealing with some wild stuff.
I know, and it's amazing to me that I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
I think the natural authority was something I always knew I had, and that helped.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I had an encounter. My brother had an encounter with some really harsh, negative shadow beings or whatever that harassed him when he did his paper route. And
Mhm.
I was able to yell at them and tell them to go away and leave them alone, or else I'd be back. And they did.
Hmm.
So then I knew. And then I was attacked by a spirit, tried to possess me
Mhm.
when I was a teenager. And when it happened, I knew what was going on and I knew what to do about it, and I wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
And so I expelled it and stopped it from what it was trying to do. And then went back to bed and went to sleep. Woke up in the morning and freaked out because it was like, what? I mean, that thing was so real to me. I thought my house was on fire.
Whoa.
And the fire, I could hear the fire, I could see the dancing of the flames of the fire. And then the black thing on the ceiling came and pinned me to the bed and actually pushed me down into the bed to where the springs in the bed were yelling. It was
Wow.
making noises under me. And so, I thought everybody else was either outside or dead, and I was going to get up and jump out the window because the house was on fire. And then this thing pinned me to the bed and I couldn't move. But in my head, I had that voice, that thing that said I would know what I needed to know when I needed to know it. And I said, I know what you're trying to do. My will is stronger than yours. You can't have me. And then I lifted my head, which took forever. But I was
Wow.
only able to move my head. The rest of me from here down was just completely paralyzed. And
Wow.
I'd been awake before I rolled over. So it wasn't like a night terror, because I thought
Yeah.
about that later.
Yeah.
And when I sat up, it all went away and the fire went away. But the weird smell was still in my room, which had woken me up initially. And I got
Whoa.
out of bed in the middle of the night without turning on a light, went all the way downstairs to check on the fireplace to see if someone had like closed the flue and the house was filling with smoke, and that's what it was smelling. And no, there was a little bit of smoke just going up the chimney. The flue
Hmm.
was open.
Wow.
So then I went back to my room and laid down and went to sleep. And when I
Wow.
told my mother, I was afraid to tell her that it was real, but she knew it was. I told her it was a dream.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've met other people that have had a similar thing happen to them when they're about that age. I don't
I
know if it's
Yeah, I had scary stuff happen when I was little, and I shut down my abilities because I was scared. And one of the coolest things I remember when I was little, I mean, really little, I saw this huge green spirit materialize in my room. And it was like larger than the room. And so I was terrified. And to me, like I remembered he kind of looked like the Grinch or something to me. And it was like after I had my spiritual awakening, I made a friend who's clairvoyant, and she's talking to me and she's like, you have this like really tall green guide that's always with you. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. And I remembered instantly, and I was like, I know who it is. And so he wasn't bad, but he scared me because it was so unfamiliar.
well,
You
right, and that's the thing. So I don't think they take it personally though.
know? No. Yeah. Well, this has been a blast. I feel like I could talk to you forever. I feel like you've taken me on like a broom ride through your life.
Yes, a little bit for sure. A lot more than we thought we were going to talk about, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I could see all of your stories being like a series of books, like even a
But that's
series.
why I'm making them into videos.
Yes,
It's easier in
it is
some ways.
easier. I hope
And
somebody comes along and turns them into books as well. I don't know. That would be so cool. But I so appreciate you sharing your stories with us and on your channel. And I bet a lot of people are gonna want to go check out your channel now.
well, that would be great. I would love that.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you would like to leave our audience with or anything before we go?
Um, know that you're not alone.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of life out there that might be different from us, but is willing to reach out and share and support us. So if you're going through a rough time, talk to a tree.
Yeah, I
They're
love
always willing to listen.
Yeah. You can hug them too.
Yeah. Some trees get hugged too much. They've
Oh,
actually had
really?
signs. Yes. There's some big redwoods apparently that have been stressed by how many people have hugged them. But
Oh my gosh. Well, good to know. Maybe ask permission.
yes, I think in general, your average tree in a park or in your yard has not been overhugged. So you're
Yeah.
probably okay.
I
But
love
just sort of pay attention to the wonders and the awe and the beauty and stuff that's everywhere around us and embrace it, because that's what's going to get us through the dark times.
Yeah, absolutely. Nature is always here for us, isn't she?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Shifra.
You're welcome.